Welcome to the UTG at Work podcast. I'm Deacon Mike Houghton. I'm the Executive Director of an apostolate called UTG at Work. Our mission is to help women and men joyfully live their faith and witness to Christ in the gospel in the workplace. I'm happy to be with you as we explore the Sunday gospel in ways that help people who work. You can find this podcast as well as helpful articles, videos, and other materials on our website, which is utgatwork.org. You can also subscribe to this podcast through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and other podcasting sites. This weekend we celebrate the 23rd Sunday in Ordinary Time, and our gospel is a reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. Glory to you, O Lord. Again, Jesus left the district of Tyre and went by way of Sidon to the Sea of Galilee and to the district of the Decapolis. And people brought to him a deaf man who had a speech impediment and begged him to lay his hand on him. He took him off by himself away from the crowd. He put his finger into the man's ears and, spitting, touched his tongue. Then he looked up to heaven and groaned and said to him, Ephphatha, that is, be opened. And immediately the man's ears were opened. His speech impediment was removed and he spoke plainly. He ordered them not to tell anyone, but the more he ordered them not to, the more they proclaimed it. They were exceedingly astonished, and they said, He has done all things well. He makes the deaf hear and the mute speak. The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. Did you know that there are an estimated 2.4 billion Christians in the world? That's more than 1 out of every 4 people alive. That's actually pretty amazing. Christianity is the largest religion in the world, followed by about 1.8 billion Muslims. One would think that a group this size could move mountains when it comes to living their faith in the public square, including at work, but this is clearly not the case. In fact, despite our numbers, we Christians are often shut down, if not even persecuted, in workplaces around the world, including here in these United States. One of the reasons that we struggle to be appreciated and recognized is that, despite our large numbers, we are a divided group. It's estimated that there are about 45,000 denominations of Christians in the world, and we're far often too content to argue with one another over aspects of the faith where we differ, rather than joining forces to promote the good news given to us by our common Savior, Jesus Christ. This is rather sad, isn't it? If only we could work to appreciate what we have in common, rather than fighting over where we differ, we could find great unity and make tremendous progress in terms of joyfully sharing our faith with others. In reality, although we Christians may distinguish ourselves over our minor differences, many people who are not Christians view us Christians as all being the same, as having the same beliefs. And so, persecution of Christians around the world doesn't vary based on what denomination of Christian you happen to be. A few years ago, Pope Francis said this, quote, In some countries, they kill Christians for wearing a cross or having a Bible, and before they kill them, they do not ask them whether they are Anglican, Lutheran, Catholic, or Orthodox. Their blood is mixed. To those who kill, we are Christians. We are united in blood, even though we have not yet managed to take necessary steps toward unity between us, and perhaps the time has not yet come. Unity is a gift that we need to ask for, unquote. And I would take this idea of the gift of unity even further. I long for the day when we look for common ground not only amongst brother and sister Christians, but also amongst people of all faiths and all walks of life. Mind you, I don't think I'll ever see it, but the world would be a much better place if we all worked to respect one another, rather than fighting with one another over our differences. In today's gospel, Jesus goes into a place called the district of the Decapolis, where he cures a man of his deafness and speech impediment. The Decapolis was an area across the Sea of Galilee from where Jesus lived. It wasn't a single city, but it was a grouping of 10 cities who shared a similar culture and ethnic makeup. The term Decapolis is roughly translated as 10 cities. It was made up of Gentiles, that is, people who did not embrace the Jewish faith. As such, they most likely didn't understand or perhaps even care about the fact that many Jews saw Jesus as their Messiah. What they did understand was that he worked miracles, and so they brought the man to him who was deaf and struggled to speak. It's important to remember that in Jesus' time, Jews didn't mix with Gentiles. This was very much looked down upon. And yet, we find that Jesus goes into Gentile territories multiple times in his ministry, and that he's quite willing to heal the Gentile people, as he did for the man in today's gospel. To us today, this might not seem like a big deal, but it was a big deal in Jesus' time. When Jesus cured this Gentile, the people didn't spend a lot of time worrying about the fact that he wasn't one of them. In fact, we read, they were exceedingly astonished, and they said, "He has done all things well." Regardless of Jesus' ethnic and religious background, they were elated that he restored the man to good health and gave him his life back. There's a lesson here for all of us who are Christian, and especially for all of us who are Christians who work. That lesson is that deep down inside, we all have the same hopes and dreams, no matter what faith we hold, no matter what political party we belong to, no matter how many tattoos we have or what color our hair happens to be. We all have a desire to be happy and healthy and fulfilled. Now, the happy and healthy parts aren't very hard to define. We can all pretty much agree on what that means, but fulfillment, that's a different story. We who are Christians understand that the fulfillment that people seek is only truly found in God, even if they don't appreciate it themselves. As St. Augustine said, our hearts are restless until they rest in God. How often do we see people trying to find their fulfillment in money, power, sex, and other things that pull their attention away from the one true God? In many regards, they may not be bad people, but they don't understand what they're missing. How can we ever find a way to speak to them about the one true God if they really don't know him? How can we effectively share our faith with someone who may not even realize what true fulfillment means? Perhaps, if we can start by meeting them on the level of happy and healthy, we can someday hope to gain their trust and then move into the idea of fulfillment. Isn't this what Jesus did in today's gospel? There are several signs of this in what we read. Notice first that Jesus initiated the move into Gentile land. He was willing to meet them on their home turf. Notice as well that he didn't try to convert the man to Judaism or to any other faith before curing him. He just knew that the man needed healing, and so he healed him. Notice that when he healed the man, he took him off to a place by himself from the crowd. Perhaps he did it because the man was a private man. Perhaps he did it so that he could heal this Gentile away from his Gentile brothers and sisters, who may not have appreciated him coming to a Jew for healing. We don't know. But in some way, this was necessary for this man in this instance, because this is not a typical approach to healing for Jesus. And finally, notice that after the healing, he asked them all to keep it under wraps, but they couldn't help themselves. They happily went out and proclaimed it to others. Even though Jesus didn't ask them to evangelize, in fact, he specifically told them not to, they did it anyway. And this is how we need to approach evangelization at work as well. We can't start by preaching to our coworkers. We can't start by telling them that they may go to hell if they don't convert, and we certainly can't start by pointing out their sins. No, we start by meeting them where they're at, helping them as they need to be helped, and loving them simply because they too were created in the image and likeness of God. We start by being a person of joy so that they can see something in us that they want. We start by caring for them when they're down or have lost a loved one. In short, we start by meeting their immediate needs, which often have nothing to do with faith. Once they realize that we truly do want what's best for them, then we can approach them about evangelization, but not before they trust us. As they say, people don't care what you know until they know that you care. St. Paul talks about this concept in Romans 15. He says, "We who are strong ought to put up with the failings of the weak, and not to please ourselves. Let each of us please our neighbor for the good, for building up." On our UTG at Work website, we have an 8-part video series called Evangelizing at Work, which discusses this idea in more detail. Each of the videos is very short, usually around 5 minutes long, so that if you choose to view them with a group of people before work or during lunch, there will be plenty of time for discussion after watching the videos. Feel free to check them out at our UTG at Work website, utgatwork.org. So, where is your Decapolis? Where are you surrounded by people who don't share your faith or who have no faith at all, but who are nonetheless people in need of healing? For many of us, our Decapolis is at work. To reach them, you must be willing to first address their very real needs, many of which have nothing to do with a life of faith. Once you do that, you have the freedom to introduce them to the faith so that they can be healed in a much more profound way. so that they can come to know the true fulfillment that comes from knowing the Lord. Who knows, in time they may become evangelizers themselves who will ultimately reach out to others in need. Thanks for joining me for this week's UTG at Work podcast. I look forward to meeting again next week. In the meantime, I encourage you to boldly live your faith in the workplace in the week ahead. I'll pray for your success, and I ask that you pray for the success of this UTG at Work apostolate. If you want to learn more about us, please visit utgatwork.org. Now go in peace, glorifying the Lord by your life.